anything now.
Lots of attendees.
Yeah. Bybars, there's the off chance that Kurt is one of the attendees, so we might want to look and bring him back in if he is. I don't see him, but just in case. Hello, everybody. This is Seth Colby from the Department of Taxation. We are just waiting for a couple more of the members to sign on, and then we will begin with the meeting. So we appreciate your patience right now. Thank you.
Seth?
Yes.
Hi, Jack here. Just if Kurt doesn't come on in the next minute or so, can Marilyn convene the meeting and we can just start taking care of some of the
I'm texting with Kurt. He's trying to get on. Hold on. Oh, let me see if I can.
Somebody. Marilyn.
There's the camera.
Oh, there's Isaac Troy.
Oh, they see you. The not very close. Okay. So the camera goes automatically?
Hello, Director Troy.
Hi, good morning. Machine's working.
Yes, this is our new, the new Director of Taxation, Isaac Troy. This is the council. We're just, Director Troy, we're just waiting for the Chairman Kawafuchi to sign in. I'm working with him on that.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You look very small.
Yes.
Maybe you have to have
I wish I could say the same for you.
Oh, Zoom etiquette.
You wanna? Just the camera, so it's. If you can, if not.
Yeah, right there. Can you bring it down?
What does this do?
It's the camera right there. Zoom in.
Oh, no, where this button zooms in, I think it's possible. But we can try.
Lower it.
Hey, Isaac, can you please mute yourself and then unless you're speaking, is that possible?
Okay.
Thank you.
That's good advice for all of us.
Bye bars. I see Kurt in the attendees. Can you bring him in to become a participant, please?
Okay, working on it.
Thank you.
I added Kurt.
Great.
Should be here.
Hi, Kurt. You're here, but you're muted and
Okay.
we don't see your video.
Okay. I don't know what I can do about it. It's, I have my camera on. Oh, okay. Okay. Can you see me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I had to. Okay, sorry everyone. I was waiting for the link to be resent, and we also switched to Zoom today. I think in the future it's good, Seth, if you could resend the link on the morning of the meeting, just because it gets buried in everyone's email, when you send it way ahead of time. Okay, first item on the agenda today is there any correspondence to the Council of Revenues?
No, there's not.
Okay. Okay, let me pick this up. Okay, next item is the minutes of the July 30th meeting, July 30th, 2020. Any comments? Any discussion?
I provided some comments to Seth, small minor edits.
Okay. And Seth,
I
did you?
move to approve.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, take a vote on the July 30th meeting. Okay, Vice Chair Niwal.
I approve.
Dr. Sider, how?
Aye.
Okay. Dr. Bonham.
Aye.
Okay. Christy.
I approve.
Jessica. Scott.
Approve.
Okay, so it's approved unanimously. Okay. Okay, next item on the agenda is review of recent legislation. I believe you're going to present that, Seth?
Yeah, and I'll just share my screen so you guys can see it. Chat. So you guys should be able to see that. It's table 2. It's also in your packets as well. There were two, as all of you guys know, it was a short legislative session this year. There was two laws that passed and were enacted to law that affect taxation. The first one is the conformity law, which is a pretty normal law that we do every single year to conform with the IRS tax code. We expect no material impact from that. The other one was SB 2820, which essentially disallowed the use of renewable energy tax credits for utility scale solar for projects that have not been approved by 2019. That will not have an impact on your forecast because it will save money. This law will save money. However, since it's not in the baseline of your forecast, we did not include it in the baseline of, you weren't expecting the Council on Revenue nor BNF were expecting new solar projects to come online, and that was not in the budget. So when you get rid of these tax credits that are associated with this, then it does not have an impact on the baseline, and that's why we are using indeterminate, because it's not going to really affect it's not going to be valuable information when taking into account the forecast. Does anybody have any questions about that one?
Sid, what did the bill do to the credit, to the solar credit?
So after any utility scale solar that is approved after December 31st, 2019 cannot access the renewable energy tax credit.
Okay. So it was a clarification that they couldn't access the credit?
Well, the projects that did pass before 2019 can access the credit, right? So we're going to actually expect an increase in the renewable energy credit use in the coming years. However, that and then we'll see a drop after that. But since that's not baked into our baseline of the tax revenues, it is a gain, but it would be a gain that's not incorporated into relative to our baseline. So we're not including it.
Seth, this was for commercial projects only?
Yes, above 5 megawatts, which is pretty large.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how much credits are being claimed a year?
Yes.
In recent, how much is it?
It's around $70 to $80 million.
Okay. Any other questions or set from the council on this specific bill? You also conform to the exemption, right? The income tax exemption for the PPP loan if it's forgiven?
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's all you can read. It's all more specific here in SB 2920, yeah.
Do we have an idea how much the amount of PPP loans that were extended in Hawaii?
I do not have that information. But if they were extended as a loan,
yeah,
I can look it up. The number I remember was, I don't want to throw out a number. Christy probably remembers.
It was a large number, but I don't remember what it is.
Was it hundreds of millions or was it in the billions?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was, the question is, was it billions? Let me double check.
Why am I thinking 800 million or something like that?
Because if I said that bill actually goes,
I think it was.
It gives the exemption, but I think because of an IRS's opinion, it cuts both ways where they lose the deduction if they get the forgiveness.
That's potential. But I mean, the biggest exemption was from GET, right?
Yeah, but that was issued administratively by the department, right? Through one of their tax information releases.
I think it had to get passed into law as well.
Not for the GT exemption.
Oh,
For the income tax,
okay.
yeah, it's in your tax information release.
I mean, either way, from the point of view of this council, there's no impact, right? And there's no impact on taxation from the monies from PPPs or, yeah, from PPP grants.
Mhm. Okay.
I'm seeing a 2
Don't
billion.
wait for me. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of minor stuff, right? We've got a
Yeah.
forecast to finish.
Okay. So I think your tax information release was 2020-2. That's where the administration gave the exemption. They said that the forgiveness of the PPP loan would be exempt from general excise taxes. Okay. Okay. Moving on to the agenda item. Let me look at this. Okay, I think, Seth, you can go ahead on there's another bill, right, in the recent legislation?
Nope, there was just these two bills.
Okay, I thought you just talked about the conformity bill, but you covered
So
both.
there were 2.5 billion in PPP loans in Hawaii.
So that came in to Hawaii's businesses to spend on payroll and rent and I guess certain other items. Okay, Seth, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Or are you done on the recent legislation?
I'm done with the recent legislation. So if the next item is the presentation on the current status of collections.
Okay. Okay. So the next item is the department's presentation on revenues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay,
Go
great.
ahead, sir.
So once again, thank you for all being here. I'm going to just do a very short synopsis on the current state of collections. And as you know, that there was a shift in the tax deadline from April 20th to July 20th for individual income or for all income from calendar year 2019. And we're going to look at the implications of that, right? So here we are. This is the July preliminary figures. This is from that we received a month ago. And what you'll see is a couple things, right? You'll see really high levels of corporate income tax and individual income tax. And that's because this is the number that normally where we would have come in April and May of the last fiscal year, it came in this fiscal year, right? And so it's making it harder for us to understand what is really going on with the current level of revenues. Just to highlight it, we were up 33% for the month of July over the following year. So a big number, right? The question is, how big is that number and how do we adjust for that? So this is what this slide does. Now, what you'll see is the income shift due to the filing date was 308 million, or relative, that's about 4.3% of fiscal year 2020 revenue. That's much larger than I had anticipated in the calculations, which were between 2 and 3%, right? And the way I calculated that is I just said, okay, what was the revenue in corporate and individual income in for estimated taxes and payments with returns in the previous year, and I compared that to this year, right? And so I found the difference, and that's the difference that the extra money that we received due to the filing shift. That is this amount right here, 308,265,000. And then I did a number of adjustments which you can see here. So the top line I did for general fund, individual income, and corporate. The top chart is monthly adjustment, and the bottom line is annual adjustment. So what does that mean? So I just showed you yesterday, or in the last slide, that we were up 33% on the year. But if I adjust for the 308 million, we were down 16.8% relative to the previous year in July 2020. Okay. For the annual adjustment, as most of you guys know, for the fiscal year, we were down 6.4% for fiscal year 2020. However, if we shift that 308 million back into fiscal year 2020, we're down 2.1%, right? So you guys can think about what's happening there. I also did it for individual income tax. So we were down 12.6% on the year, fiscal year 2020 for individual income tax. If the adjustments are made, we put that the 281 million that came from individual income taxes, we would be down 1.6%. For corporate income tax, we would be down, we got an extra $26.7 million. And if we put it back, we would be down 62.3%. Now, what's really dragging down the individual income numbers, as you'll see, is the corporate income tax. And that's largely due to, we had very high refunds in fiscal year 2020. This is a lot to take in. Does anybody have any questions about that or this?
Sid, for the July payment, did we also receive additional estimated tax payments from 2020?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a, do you know roughly how much that was?
Yeah, you can kind of look. So declared estimated taxes were 237 million in last July. In the previous July, it was 26 million, right? So there is about $210 million in extra declared estimated taxes than what we normally would have brought in. Anything else?
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll keep moving on.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the preliminary for August 2020, right? And this is just fresh, hot off the presses. This came out today. And what you'll see is we are down 25%, 25.1% in GE, and corporate income tax were very high. We're still high. Individual income tax were high, up 70.6%. Transient accommodation tax were down 92%. And for the total general fund, we're up 5.6%. Now that's largely due to the shift in the income tax filing, right? Now, if we take that money out, the $308 million that we're talking about, this is what we would get in our preliminary, right? GET stays the same. We're slightly down in individual income tax, and we're very much down on corporate tax. TAT stays the same. And so adjusted, for fiscal year to date, we'd be down 20.7%. I just wanted to show you a couple more slides about
Seth,
what's,
Seth?
yeah.
if I could interrupt. So that is year-to-date number, right? So that
Yes.
includes both July and August.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Sid, can I ask you a question too? In light of the high unemployment, do you have any idea why the withholding on taxes for individuals is pretty close to last year? It's 354 million versus 359 million. I would have expected the number to have gone down quite a bit more.
I have a slide on just withholding taxes. So
Okay, you're going to talk, you're
I'll
going to
talk
cover it later?
Yeah,
Okay.
and if you want to have additional questions, please hit me up. Okay.
Okay.
So this is GET, and this is month over month, right? So this is March 2020 over March 2019. This is April 2020 over April 2019, year over year, right? And what I wanted to show is this is what's happening to our GET. It cratered in May, which makes sense, because this is actually for economic activity in April, which was the bulk of the shutdown. It rebounded in June, and then it's been declining ever since. And now this June and July, this rebound is still bad, right? I mean, it's still down 16.2%, but this is what's going on right now. I just wanted to highlight, yeah.
With regard to these, is this pure GET, or does this also factor in use tax? Because, you know, with the shutdown, people were shifting more towards online purchases. Now, granted, some I guess online retailers are charging the tax, which I would assume is being remitted, but there may be others that are not shifting the burden to the individual purchasers. Are we capturing that at all?
If anybody's paying use tax, they are. We do have legislation that mandates that any e-seller that sells over $100,000 of merchandise to Hawaii has to collect the use tax and all GE taxes on behalf of the buyer. So we don't believe that there's a huge tax gap from like small buyers or people buying stuff from like small retailers on the mainland, but it is a possibility. And that would, unless they were claiming the use tax, which most buyers do not claim the use tax, it wouldn't be there.
Yeah, Scott, I think at prior meetings, we were advised that Amazon had reached an agreement and agreed to pay some of the general excise tax. And then, there was a Supreme Court decision, as Seth mentioned, that basically said that it's constitutional to collect the general excise tax, even though the seller, like Amazon, lacks physical presence in the state. But if they have enough economic activity, they're supposed to be paying the general excise tax, and the threshold is 100,000. But there was kind of a puka in the law because Amazon may have initially started collecting and started paying the general excise tax on their sales, but they weren't collecting it from third-party sellers. If you go on Amazon, they sell on behalf of a lot of third parties. But I think that law was fixed, right, Seth, maybe a year or two ago, yes, where Amazon was required to collect and pay over the general excise tax from third-party sellers that sell through its website.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, can I move on?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Please.
All right, so this is the withholding tax. So this is the same numerical computation, right? Only on withholding on wages, right? So we saw this big, up until April, things were good. Then we see this big crash in May, which makes sense because there was the layoffs, and then it had been gradually increasing, and then a slight decline in the new fiscal year, but not very much, right? So why is this happening? One of the big hypotheses that we had is people are taking withholding on their unemployment insurance. We checked in with the Department of Labor, and 30% of the people who are claiming unemployment insurance are electing to have their taxes withheld, right? So this is
both state as well as federal set.
Yes,
okay.
But from our perspective, it only matters state, right?
Yeah. But I'm asking because I'm wondering if the question was, are they electing to have taxes withheld as opposed to, federal and state taxes withheld?
Yeah. Okay, and then so currently our withholding is down 1.5%. If you adjust for all of the wages withheld from UI, we would be down 10.2% on the year. So we'd be down something closer to where, right around here. And even with these two bad numbers, we're still up on withholding from the previous year. So anybody have questions about that?
So go ahead, Dr. Siderhouse.
When you just said we're still up from the previous year, we're not talking about fiscal year. Right?
No.
Because January, February, March, April, that's all prior fiscal year.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What I meant to say was withholding wages were up 1.9% in the previous fiscal year 2020.
Okay. All right. But at this point in fiscal year 2021,
we're down 1.5%.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Seth, I would think the number would be bigger, with the 70% that aren't having withholding, as well as people who haven't yet got their unemployment, and also reduce hours for people.
Yep. One of the things you've seen pretty much across the whole entire nation is withholding taxes have been pretty resilient during this whole crisis. So this is not, we're going to see in the next slide that Hawaii is worse than everybody else, but we do follow the same patterns as everybody else.
So one of the things that you need to keep in mind that those PPP loans.
Yeah.
A big
I was
piece
thinking,
of that was being used to continue to pay
Yeah.
salaries.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so-
that's a good point.
So people may be, they could easily be counted as unemployed, not necessarily collecting unemployment insurance, and continuing to be paid on their regular
Yeah.
payroll.
Because I think the original, that's a good point, Carl. Because originally, I think the original deadline was June 30th. So many businesses had to spend the money on the payroll before the end of June 30th. But that was subsequently extended.
Yeah, and so maybe the down by 3.3% between July and August is this. Withholding data is very current, right?
Yeah.
So what these collections represent who got paid 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
So it's much more current than GET.
Hmm.
Okay, so I'm gonna follow up. One of the things I wanted to point out is, I sit on a lot of calls and talk to a lot of other states about what's happening with collections, and a lot of other states are recovering relatively quickly. So this just goes to show you sales tax, which is, I included sales tax because individual income tax is very hard to figure it out because the shift in filing deadline. But what you'll see in this is the black line is the most recent year, right? And by July, it had pretty much recovered. Now this is for June activity, so we don't know what's going on, but on the mainland, things have recovered much more. So above this, now think about where we are. We're down, if this is 20, we're down 20%, we're down here, to put that in perspective, right? And so we're
Well,
stay down here.
That's what you would expect with no tourists.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're exactly, Carl. Like, we are unique in our state that we do not allow, we've just shut down 20% of our economy, right? And
or more for excise tax. I mean, it's
Correct.
probably close to 30% of excise tax collections.
Correct. And the only other states that I know that are struggling as much as Hawaii are New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey, which suffered the brunt of the pandemic, and they are more shut down than other places.
Seth, those are national data, right?
This is national data, yes.
Total for all states with sales taxes.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So we are part of this number, so we're dragging it down as well, right?
Not much given our size.
Yeah. Yeah. This is what happens when Hawaii reports its data. Dink.
Yeah.
Okay, next. I just wanted to show you where we were in terms of forecasts. So this line right here was the forecast that you had in January, and this is the forecast from the May meeting, right? So I think this is the base number. So fiscal year 2020 is done, and this is what you're projecting. Now, I just wanted to highlight a couple things that you did in the last forecast, right? You forecast that fiscal year 22 numbers would be less than fiscal year 2020 numbers, right? Just because even though you had -12 and 12, because of how percentages work, you didn't have it rebounding. The other thing, which is, and this is,
Wonder why.
yeah, and the other thing that at least the state is concerned with is over the long term, a dip will have huge impacts, right? So the aggregate implications of the adjustment was $10.3 billion for the six years of the budget window. And a lot of that comes from the 3% forecasts in the out years, right? Whereas if it comes back closer, then it narrows the gap. So I just thought it would be good to put this up there to visualize what all the different numbers were doing. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Is this your last slide, Seth?
Yes.
So can I raise a point about so our current forecast for fiscal 21 is -12.
Wait,
And-
actually, Carl, can I just,
Yeah, sure, go ahead. I'm sorry.
then I'll get out of, it sounds like you're going to start getting into the,
I wanted to use this chart.
okay, didn't use it. Yeah. Cause I was going to switch off this, but go ahead.
Okay, so, I mean, I don't actually need it, but so if you take the data that Seth shared on adjusting for the shifting from last fiscal year to this fiscal year, and basically what he came up with was that we would be at about minus 20% for the first 2 months of the fiscal year if we did an adjustment. On the other hand, so that gives us an idea of what those first 2 months might look like without the tax shifting. So I assumed that revenue would actually grow more slowly in October. And I mean, you can make just about any assumption you want about growth rates for the rest of the fiscal year, and you're going to come up with a fiscal year number for fiscal year 21 that's quite a bit below, I'm sorry, quite a bit stronger than the minus 12%. So you take a 20% growth rate for the rest of the fiscal year, or a 15% or whatever you want, unless you think the world's going to come to an end, and we're not going to get any bounce year over year for the second quarter of the fourth quarter of the fiscal year, right? So fourth quarter of this fiscal year will be comparing to, the April, May, June of last, when everything stopped. I'm seeing numbers better than, in the neighborhood of minus 7%, not minus 12% for this fiscal year. Did you
Carl, what are you?
like that, Seth?
Yeah. And you just to be, so I understand, when you say 15 or 20%, you mean minus 15 or minus 20%?
Correct. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, for the rest of the fiscal year.
Mhm.
And actually, I'm only doing those assumptions for. So basically, what I did was I assumed 20% drop for October, and then I just let my model run, and I'm getting numbers for a drop for fiscal 21 that are not nearly as bad as our 12%.
Yeah. And I'm happy if you guys want to, when we get to the bigger discussion, if you guys want to give me some hypothetical percentages and stuff, I'm happy to plug it in for you guys while you are discussing things.
Because it's really, really hard to get a negative number for the first quarter of the fiscal year, now that we've had 32% in the first month and almost 6% in the second month.
Yeah. And I mean, the other way to think about this is really down 2.1%, and this is down, this is down 16% if you push the individual income tax money back, or the income tax money back into the fiscal year 20.
I think, and we can discuss this more,
Yeah.
but we have GE taxes are down 25%, and hotel taxes are down 92%. So it's not, we may need to put in some pretty large numbers, unless you feel that people are going to start coming back.
Well, let me just finish up real quickly. I wanted to present a tool for you guys that we have just launched here at the Department of Taxation, and it's our data portal, right? And so this should allow you guys to experiment with more data and play with things. So let me just this is the data dashboard. So if you go to the home page, you can either go here to the data dashboard or data dashboard. And then this is all of our collection figures going back to 2000, January 2000, right? And you can look at, this is everything current I haven't put in the August numbers yet, but the August numbers will go in by the end of the day. But it does allow you to see how our collections have evolved over time. This is all of our Department of tax collections, and what you'll see is the light green is GET, the darker blue is, you know, individual income, and what makes sense is most of the volatility in our tax collections comes from month-to-month volatility comes from individual income tax. You can look at, here's all the different, you can look at April 2020 to April 2019. You can do all these different things. Here's all, you can also adjust it. So let's say we wanted to do, if you wanted to look at, you know, the calendar year versus the, instead of the fiscal year, you can do that as well and see how things change. You can even break it down by tax type. So there's department, like for example, if you want to know what's really going on with individual income tax, you can just click here and it opens it up and you can see all these things. And you can always download all the data and all of this right here and just download it as a CSV file to play with it. So yeah, sorry for the diversion right there, but I thought it would be a really useful tool for you guys in like upcoming meetings and things like that.
Jessica,
So-
did you have a comment that you were trying to make?
Sorry,
Or-
I was just trying to understand the last slide that Seth was showing, what the dotted lines were, why they were coming from a higher base.
Let me bring that back up. This slide, right?
Yeah.
Oops. The dotted lines is the percentages, right? So this is the absolute dollar figures. So this corresponds to the left-hand side. Oops. And this are the percent changes, and this corresponds to the right-hand side axis.
Okay.
So this is our last forecast.
Yes. So the orange is the January forecast, which is basically the last forecast you had before it was impacted by the pandemic. And this is the May. And so in May, you forecasted 6.3%, or no, you forecasted 7, but I adjusted it for what we really got, which is 6.3%. And then you have 12, and then you have a huge rebound up here, which like looks massive. However, if you look at this, it's still less than the fiscal year 2020. And with that, I'm done. So you guys can all talk amongst yourselves. And if I can support you at all with calculations or anything, you just let me know and I'll support you guys as you go on.
Okay.
Do you want me to keep this up here or would you, I'm gonna stop this unless you guys have any questions.
I don't know. Does anyone want to keep this up here?
It's maybe better just to see everybody's beautiful faces.
Yes. Okay. Okay, so thank you, Seth. That was very informative. So can I ask you a question? So basically, we had about 200 million in estimated taxes that should have been paid for 2020 that moved over to July. That's
Yes,
our
about
10%.
207, and then that's not including the payments with taxes, right? Which
Yeah.
is like the money you send in with your tax form.
So that's almost like a little more than 3% then that was
Yeah.
moved over. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do you guys put, you know, when someone files and pays with an extension, they make a payment, does it go on the estimated tax line or does it go payment with return?
I think it's an estimated tax. However, I am not sure.
Okay.
Forms are the same.
Yeah, I mean,
Don't
the
ask
for-
why I know.
Yeah. Like it goes in there, it goes into the bottom line is.
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, the big takeaway is it's $300 million that
Yeah.
was in fiscal year 2021 that should have been in fiscal year 2020 if the deadline had not been shifted.
Okay. Let's open up. I'd like to open up the discussion on general fund forecast for fiscal 2021.
Hello.
Anyone? Okay, Jack, Dr. Sidon?
Yeah, I just kind of, we started this with Carl's discussion about the chart at the back and his comment that he thinks that fiscal 2021 is going to come in at, I think you said -7, maybe as a discussion point. But anyway, what I wanted to know is what are your assumptions about tourism that underpin your fiscal 21 forecast?
I think that's a question for me.
Yeah.
Well, your guess is as good as mine.
Well, my guess is it's really bad, and my numbers that I come up with in terms of a forecast based on the models are significantly lower than what we have right now for forecast.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you about the models because, I mean, the models based on the forecast that I submitted are producing huge negative numbers. I mean, I don't believe them. And if you take the exact same numbers that I provided to DOTAX and run them through the general fund forecasting equation that UHERO uses, you don't get numbers that negative. I mean, by almost there's like a 10 percentage point difference between what the DOTAX model is producing and what my model is producing. And that was before any adjustment for the tax shifting, right? I mean, we shifted a whole bunch of tax revenue from last year to this year, and it's not going away, right? It's not, it has to be built into this year's forecast. Right. So we really have to come up with a set of assumptions about what the economy and what tax collections look like from October on. And so what I'm doing is looking at so for example, Seth did the calculation of what would have happened without the tax shifting, and we get a number of like -20% for the general fund for the first 2 months of the fiscal year. Do we think the rest of the fiscal year is going to be worse than that? I don't think so. I mean, it's possible, right? If we literally don't open to tourism at all, it could be worse. Our baseline assumption that we're working on for our next forecast which is what's built into the numbers I'm using, is a reopening of tourism mid-November, and at really, really low numbers, right? And then ramping up some in December. And that's an assumption.
What kind of numbers are you talking about in terms of total tourism for the fiscal year? So, we know it's 0 through mid-November as far as you guys are concerned, basically.
Yeah.
So what are we looking at the total? Are we looking at a total of 2 million or a total of 4 million or?
Let me see. Give me 1 second. So the assumption for where we start in November, December is that between 10 and 20% of, so think about 3,000-4,000 passengers a day, right, at most. And right now we're averaging about 1,000 passengers a day. Now they're not all tourists, but they're never all tourists. So I got to pull up the survey I sent in. That's where I would know So our fiscal year, we have arrivals in here or just spending? Total arrivals by air. Oh, these are only percentages. Let's see. I think I have the hard numbers in my, yeah. So total arrivals, 1.8 million for fiscal year 21 is what.
Yeah, that's about what I assumed too.
Wow.
And so that's, yeah. So, I mean, we're talking, I think, not getting back to more than 40-50% by the end of the fiscal year, by next summer. But I'm talking about something that's more mechanical. we have a first quarter of the fiscal year that's almost certainly going to be positive. And so, you can make assumptions about 20% down, 25% down, whatever you want for the for the second and third quarters of the fiscal year. And I would argue the fourth quarter is going to be up 20 to 30% because it's bounced back off of, last April, May, June. And so if you do that math, you don't get a number anywhere near minus 12%. Maybe Seth will give us the number.
Carl, sorry, you're saying that first quarter is positive, including the tax shift.
The shift, that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, take the tax shifting out like Seth did, and I think you get minus 20%, maybe minus 21% for the first 2 months of the fiscal year. So that would be the effect without the tax shifting, right? So that at least gives you some idea of what kind of assumption you might want to make for fiscal second quarter and fiscal third quarter. And particularly if you don't think things are going to be getting worse, right? If you think that there is going to be some reopening to tourism, that we're actually going to get our act together on managing the virus locally, there's all kinds of things that are, there's a lot of different ways that things could come out much more optimistic, primarily through large-scale testing and an eventual, and so the assumption that we're making when we're thinking about tourism reopening slowly in November is that a vaccine won't be widely available until the second half of next year, until the second half of 2021. And so that's why we get such a slow recovery in tourism once we begin to reopen.
Yeah.
That's sort of our baseline assumption.
Okay. Carl, Dr. Bonham, if I could interrupt. So Seth, we're getting a comment from the media that we're not following the Sunshine Law, that they can't record the meeting. Is the recording going to be available after the meeting on the website? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the recording for the media, the recording is going to be posted on the website, so it will be available. And obviously you can record this meeting by not through Zoom, but they can record it with like a hand recorder or like a tape recorder.
You can record it with your own computer. Just quick time your screen, you're done. We're not preventing anybody from recording the screen.
Oh, we haven't disabled it?
Not that I didn't, nothing has, we're trying to make this process as transparent as possible, right? So
yes,
unless there's some trick that is just not allowing people to record the screen, I don't know what it is. We can go back and address it. But again, even if that's happening, there will be a video available of this meeting within a day of this meeting.
Okay, I know I can record it. I just played with the button.
Yeah.
I don't know about the public though.
Yeah.
Okay, but as far as you know, we didn't disable the recording function. Okay. Okay.
Can I add a comment?
Please continue. Yes.
If you're done. My concern, I came out probably a kind of positive on this, on the equation, but my feeling is that we're not going to get the CARES money that we had in the beginning of this year that kind of is artificially pumping up the economy to the end of this year. We're not going to have that money. And recently I had a chance to go to the Bay Area, and I observed, I guess it was quite different than what I expected. A lot of the businesses were shut down, boarded up, Fisherman's Wharf, everywhere. And the economy there is not great. And we are expecting a lot of these tourists from the West Coast to fly over from the mainland over to Hawaii, but a lot of them are choosing to drive for their vacation. And there's a lot of people still afraid of flying. The plane that I came on back to Maui, I was like one of 30 passengers of a plane that holds 130 seats. And it was the only flight from the mainland to Maui. Previously we had 4 flights. And we have the tourism, the plane, I guess for the hotels and also for the airlines, we're assuming that we're going to have this demand for tourists, that we had in the past. And as soon as we lift up and have the 14-day quarantine lifted, all these tourists are going to come back, at a pretty hefty pace. But I kind of question that now, because I drove over to Lahaina, for example. I drove over to Wailea. A lot of shopping centers are closed, boarded up. You don't have the restaurants that we did before. Some of the, well-known restaurants, Mama's Fish House and Haere Maili, all of them are closed. And some of the businesses are permanently closed. And we have all the tour companies, and we have all the, all the activities that we previously had that aren't going to be here anymore. So we're talking about a tourist coming here and not going to have the same kind of tourist experience that they had in the past. And it will be like touring a devastated area. It's like when I went over to the Bay Area, it was like that. It was a lot different experience, and it felt like I was just stuck in my hotel room. And they did, though, have they did allow restaurants to have outdoor seating. And I guess they were flexible in zoning laws. So we had restaurants with outdoor seating. Some of them were where the streets were closed, and restaurants were allowed to put in tables and chairs and whatever to expand the seating area for the restaurants. Well, people were using whatever they could to keep their businesses going. And with so many businesses there, and I understand there was about over 50% of the businesses are closed down in San Francisco. I'm not sure that we're gonna see the demand that we saw in the past. And so even with the 14-day quarantine lifted, the demand that we saw in the past and the amount of money that people will have may not be what we thought. We're assuming that the airlines are going to have their flights. We're assuming the restaurants are going to be there. We're assuming that Hawaii will have a good, will be able to provide the visitor experience that it did in the past. And that's where I have a question that, the longer this quarantine goes on, the longer tourists are kept out, we may be permanently damaging what we had offered in the past. So I don't know that I could agree that we will have the kind of tourist demand that we had in the past.
So are we clear that what I was talking about was for the whole fiscal year?
Yes.
20% of the visitors from the previous fiscal year.
Yeah, because
I don't see that as, we're talking less than 2 million visitors. So somehow or other, I think that's very achievable. That's just the richest people in the world deciding to come home and or come back. One of the things that is so unique about this, the COVID recession is, it's not so unique, but the people who are getting hurt are the poorest people across the country, across the world. And in fact, unless you're a business owner of a restaurant or a bar, you're probably, as a higher income household, you're probably doing better than you were before the recession. There's income disparity, income inequality is growing. And so one more, if you look at the bookings data that we have right now for the state, room nights on the books right now for January, for December and January, let me double check. It looks to me like 40 to 50% of last year's booking levels right now on the books. And that's probably too optimistic. We saw these spikes in room nights on the books back in September when people thought the state was going to reopen, and then we saw it, and so you can see a little bit of a bump in October. But if the state can reopen without a quarantine, with pre-flight testing, by December, hopefully before that, and there's going to be a lot of pressure to reopen by Thanksgiving, there is demand out there. The airlines are prepared to bring the flights back, and the demand exists.
I guess my question is whether the businesses that are catering to the tourists will still be around. You know, the tourist activities.
No, many of them won't. We had this conversation last time.
Yeah, that's correct.
It's going to be a different experience.
I guess we have to be more welcoming of the tourists.
My hunch is we will be.
But Carl,
I would like to just point out that we are starting from a very, very, very low number, because we're down 98%. So to get up to 20 means that we have to really grow by a lot. I would echo what Marilyn was saying. I mean, I was recently on the mainland. People are driving instead of flying. Camping is way up. People are in their RVs so they don't have to stay in hotels. I don't know how soon that's going to turn around. And people are experiencing the joys of staying home or driving someplace instead of flying someplace. And it may be a more permanent change in how people, use their leisure time. I would agree with Carl that there are people who may be flying in on their private jets and don't have to worry about this so much. But whether we'll get up to that number, given how far down we are now, given that we're down 98%, to get up to even 20% as an average for the year, I think would be, that seems like a stretch. Getting there by the end of the fiscal year, yeah.
So Carl, you said that your booking numbers are showing about 40% for, I'm assuming, if you just take that for half of the year, then, if it's been shut down for the first half of the year, that gets us to 20%, right? If you're basically just saying, it would seem to, by reason, that 20% makes sense to me, at least, because of the fact that, the bookings, if it's 40% for the second half of the year, 0 for the first half, you average it out, it's going to be 20%.
Yeah, but it's not 20% for the second half of the year. Well, it might be for the second half of the fiscal year. I was only referring, when you start looking at what's on the books right now for the second half of the fiscal year, it's really too far out to have much. All I'm saying is that there is evidence that demand exists for November and really it's December and January, right? So those normal holiday periods and there's a hump in the bookings in December and January, and actually Thanksgiving and plus the Christmas holiday period. And when you compare the bookings for the current year with last year, it's at about 40% of last year's levels. And presumably the booking window has gotten even shorter. And so, I think if we're open in the Christmas holidays with pre-flight testing, so, we think about what the level of demand is, and it's all going to change, once there's a vaccine and people feel comfortable with the vaccine, but 2, it's going to change when people know that they're going to be getting on a plane where other people have been tested. So, nobody knows what the outcome is going to be for tourism or for the pandemic or for testing. So I would like to ask Seth to run some numbers. Assume that revenues are down for the next 3 fiscal quarters, or by 25%, and take the positive fiscal quarter for the current one. And so we have 2 months of the fiscal quarter at -20 when you adjust. So assume that's what we get for October, -20. Okay, when you do that, you get a positive for the first fiscal quarter on the order of 1 to 2%. And then what do you want to assume for
I'm working on it.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you what I'm getting, but we've had some challenges keeping our data current with what DOTAX has. I'm hoping there's going to be an API available with their new dashboard at some point, but I assumed that October would be down 30%, and the next 2 quarters would be down 20%. And then I let the model bounce back in the 4th fiscal quarter. And when I do that, I get a 21 fiscal year of about -8%.
So Carl, can I ask one other question?
Yeah.
So with regard to the visitors in your model and the assumption of the visitor spending, is it still on par with what we've seen in the past? Is that the assumption? Because, or is the thought that once again, it seems like right now it's going to be more budget travel. I mean, the airlines are going to be heavily discounting, so we may see visitors that are going to be more budget conscious, that are not going to be spending as much. To Marilyn's point, they may not have much to spend on too. But would that impact? Was that factored in at all?
Well, it is, but I'm not sure I agree that they're going to be budget travelers. I mean, some of them are. On the other hand, on Oahu, short-term vacation rentals are deemed non-essential. So we've lost about 7,000 short-term vacation rentals. So most people there'll be much more use of hotels and timeshares, and probably the first people that are going to come back are timeshares, and people who own properties. And so it's going to be a completely different kind of experience for them, and they're probably still going to be like the rest of us, ordering our food in rather than going out and sitting down in a restaurant, whether it's indoor or outdoor. So it's hard to tell, but our spending forecast does include a lower per person per day spending, if for no other reason because hotel rates are going to be are and will be marked down for an extended period of time.
Thank you.
I agree that the high-end restaurants, the high-end, I guess what the offerings were, I think they're not going to be around, so the spending is going to be lower than what it was in the past. It'll take time to rebuild. It'll take time to actually, I guess you have to go and market Hawaii again, because I think we've gotten some negative publicity along the way. And I think that that has to be rebuilt if we want to attract the tourists who have money. I
guess I'm not as optimistic as Carl, which is a big surprise to him, I'm sure. I'm just looking at my estimates, my forecast. I was not the most pessimistic, but if I average the 3 models, I'm down about 20%. And if I take that 3% bump from the individual income tax or the tax shift,
4%.
that makes it more like a minus 17%. So my estimate or forecast or guesstimate, I mean, everything is so up in the air.
How do you get
slightly worse rather than a better number?
I get the same results out of the tax model. DOTAX models, with my assumptions, I'm willing to bet are worse than yours. And
I'm number 5, by the way.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what comes out with, let's see. Yeah, I mean, so you're looking average for all models, I get minus 30% for fiscal 21 from the DOTAX models. So, I don't understand how you get a number like that when we get to fiscal 4th quarter, we're going to be comparing ourselves to a quarter that was, I don't know what it was down, minus 25% or something.
That's true. It's an easier year-over-year comparison when we get to the fourth quarter.
Right. And so in order to get a number of, I don't know how many of those DOTAX models are quarterly, if any of them are, but if you're
They're not.
if you're not doing it quarterly, then it's pretty hard to. So I think the second quarter of 2020, or in other words, the fourth fiscal quarter, was off about 35%. So in order to end up with a number for the whole year of -20, if you're down -20 every quarter, when you get to the fourth quarter, you've got to be down, 50% or something in order to see what I'm saying. So that's why I'm suggesting we essentially work from, let's discuss an assumption about what we think revenue growth should look like or will look like for the next several quarters, and just do a calculation.
Because as you say, the shift out of the fourth quarter and into the first quarter, you've got a double impact there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that brings me closer to 12%.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't argue too hard against 12%, because in this environment, I know, people hate to hear that, but the difference between 12% and 7% is beyond our capability. The uncertainty is just too enormous.
Well, my
I'm not sure
concern,
if we're there yet, but I don't feel comfortable with a more optimistic forecast.
Let's hear what Seth comes up with.
I think that we did a,
just to be clear, what do you want? I mean, especially if we include, I'm coming up with different numbers, but especially if we include the $308 million in this year, right? Because that's what we really have to do, right?
Talking the first quarter.
Yeah, because we have to add the $308 million. It's actually, I am not down very much at all, right? Because even if I'm just looking at, like, let's say we continue or down 20% for September, October, November, and then down 10% December, January, February, and then we have to be up in April, or hopefully we're up in May, April. So just give me the assumptions, but we're not down very much at all.
Assume minus 25% from October all the way through March.
Okay.
Then you'll make my point.
yeah, October through March.
And then what we're going to use for the fourth fiscal quarter is a little harder, but it's got to be positive.
Yeah. So if we're down 25% all the way until March, right? And then we're up 20% on the last fiscal quarter, right?
No, I don't think we can go up 20% because we won't have the CARES money then.
No, but we can be up 20%. We'll definitely be up. I mean, April, May, and June were so bad, right? And we didn't have the tax money back, or the individual income. We didn't have that $308 million that you definitely are going to be up at least 20% on the last quarter.
Yeah, the April.
Or not, I'm sorry, I lied. I should never say definitely, but the fact that we're even going to have the individual income tax payment deadline there instead of June, basically what we're saying, we get two big bumps from individual income tax in this fiscal year, which we don't normally do, right? And so that's one of the reasons you can say it's 20. So even if we're down 20%, or down 25% all the way until March, and then up 20% in April, May, and June, my numbers, we're down 10.2% for the whole entire year.
Yeah.
Sounds a lot like 12 to me.
Yeah.
So I was assuming a 15% bump in the fourth quarter, the fourth fiscal quarter, and I think 20% down for the other quarters, based on what we know about the first 2 months of this fiscal year. And if you look back at March through June, the average from March through June was down about 17% for the general fund. So, you know, we in order for us to be down 12%, we basically have to say things are going to continue to get worse, that there's not going to be any improvement at all. And I have a hard time buying that.
What did you assume?
Yeah, because you're also assuming, I mean, we have to build it off of a negative 7% for fiscal year 2020, right?
Yeah.
That's what did you assume for the month of September?
I assume that all of our revenues would be down 25% compared to the previous year.
From September to March of next year.
Yeah.
25% negative.
Yeah. Which is really bad.
Yeah, that's well, that's worse than what we've had so far.
Yeah,
right?
that means there's a market deterioration until.
I mean, we had an average of about minus 16, 17% down through June. If you look at July and August and you do Seth's adjustment, it's 20% down. So if we adopt 25% down, we're saying things are going to get worse than they are right now.
Carl, but isn't it fair to say that, you know, as we go out, we're not going to have, we don't know that we're going to have the same federal stimulus, all the $2.5 billion of PPP money, all the unemployment benefits, you know, the extra $600 per week that expired at the end of July.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah. But what I think Carl's trying to point out is there's a difference between what they call like rates and levels, right? So we just because we think things are worse now, so we have to put a worse percentage impact, right? But like in absolute terms, we are forecasting something very bad. It just doesn't look as bad because it's a percentage, right?
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that we're kind of artificially inflated right now because of that $2.5 million in PPP money coming in, plus all the unemployment, the extremely generous unemployment benefits that are coming in, and also the loans, you know, from small business. I don't think we're going to have that same level of juice coming in, you know, after the elections, once we get into next year.
Well, we might have Taurus.
Yeah, Kurt.
Yes.
So that's what I was going to suggest. I mean, I think that's where Seth was going. That right now, the offset is in the future is that hopefully the economy reopens. So there'll be we're going to get more tourism dollars. There'll be TAT revenue coming in. We'll get, businesses hopefully will, to Marilyn's point, there's going to be shutdowns, but hopefully the other businesses that are still able to survive and open will be able to reopen fully. You know, things will go not back to normal, but may get closer to, an open economy, which hopefully will drive the economy once again.
Yeah, but I mean, how many of the business, right now it's kind of camouflaged because of the stay-at-home and work-from-home orders. How many of those businesses are going to be able to weather, these two shutdowns and, reopen at the same level as before, with social distancing?
So what's happened already is that many of the businesses have made their adjustments, right, to the current normal. And you're right, there's a lot that will be closed permanently. In the last survey we did, the average statewide for small businesses response to whether they would be able to reopen without additional support and without tourism by October was about 16-17% of them said they thought they would never reopen. And so, all that matters. And the loss, the loss of CARES money and PPP, all of that matters. We don't know whether or not there will be additional federal stimulus. I'll be shocked if there isn't, but I don't know how big it'll be, and I don't know when it'll arrive. The only thing that we can control, that we should be able to control, is our own community's response to dealing with the pandemic, dealing with the virus, and our ability to manage the virus and begin to reopen to tourism. If we do that, then I don't think there's any reason to think that things are going to deteriorate steadily over the rest of the fiscal year.
So, Carl and Jack, you guys are thinking that we might end up with 2 million tourists for the year, which is roughly a little less, close to
Yeah,
20%, close to 20%.
Yeah, my number actually came in at a little under 1.8 million. But basically what I was doing is I was making assumptions
that we had
that,
for the fiscal year, and this is a I don't know if it's changed since I sent my numbers in. It was 1.8 million for the whole fiscal year.
right. And that's what I got independently, just, noodling around the numbers and assuming certain recovery rates and that sort of thing. And basically the last half of the fiscal year, I assume 30% return, 30% level of the tourism compared to the prior level, 2019 levels.
So just maybe this will help you guys frame things. So if everything is down 35% from September until March, then we would be down 16.4%.
And what are you assuming for the fourth fiscal quarter, or for the April, May, June?
20% up. Let me make sure I'm doing everything right.
Would it help us at all if we looked at the levels rather than the growth rates?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at some of the tables that were sent to us. For instance, model number 1 has us as fiscal 21. It's a little over 5 billion compared to 6.7 billion for fiscal 20. That's what a 25% decline is. And, my numbers, when I plugged in when you guys plugged in my forecast numbers, I'm member number 4. So I'm really at the low end.
Jack, what I'm coming up with similar assumptions to Seth, but he can flesh them out, is numbers like 1.4 billion a quarter with very little variation.
Okay, so that's,
does that make sense?
5.5 billion.
Yeah, for the fiscal year, I actually end up at a little over 6, but then my numbers is not as low because I didn't assume that as big of a drop as Seth. I should just be quiet and let him tell us what he gets.
Yeah,
It seems to me like what would be helpful is to know what the fiscal fourth quarter level is. I think people, there may be difficult to think about that in terms of growth rates, right? When you say it's up 20%, but it's only up 20% because of that bounce off of the minus 35 or whatever it was last fiscal year.
yeah. So just to give you some perspective, if everything was down 25% until March, I would get a number, and this makes sense, of $6 billion, $6 billion and 22 million. Yeah, essentially $6 billion. And your current forecast is 5.9 billion. And if we did the down 25%, or 35%.
Well, the more I hear, the more I like the 12%, in spite of my own numbers.
Hey, wasn't that my number?
I get 5.6 billion if everything's down 35% until March.
I just want to remind you the state tax, first and second quarter of the state taxes were due in April and June. So there are some practitioners who had their clients pay in estimated taxes in those months.
Yeah,
So,
but we also know for sure that $308 million of that was not paid. Right, so that's a lot of, that's 4.2% of growth, year-on-year growth from last year, and it would be even larger this year because we're operating off of a larger base, right? So it'd be,
Yeah.
the 308 is bigger now.
Yeah, but it's how much bigger is it than expected? Seth?
What do you mean?
Because when we last met, we projected that there was going to be money. We already accounted for that. The money that was due for 2019 was going to be moved over into fiscal 21. So we already took that into account. So it's the excess that we need to take into account. But there's also there's also the 200 million in estimated payments from 2020 that we did not expect to come in 2020, fiscal 2021.
If it's already been paid in, there's no additional calculation that needs to be done. The money's already in tax revenues.
But we, at the last council meeting,
we don't have to go back and ask why we missed the forecast, right? We can move on from here.
well, we already took it into account, yes, but if I'm understanding what Seth's saying, there was more than we expected. And also, I don't think we fully expected that people were going to make the 2020 estimated payments on, there was about 200 million that was made for 2020 that was made in July. We were expecting that to be made in last fiscal year because the department did not extend the estimated tax payments for 2020.
But if this shift is larger than we thought it would be,
Yeah.
then our 12% should actually, the prior forecast should actually be lower.
Yeah. So I mean,
Instead
there's
of
about
negative 12, it should be negative 10 or whatever it is.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Because the negative 12 is consistent with basically an underlying economic pattern of negative 16% if you assume the 4% shift.
Yeah, but I think the other thing, we thought the economy was going to, we thought tourism was going to open sooner. I think we're looking at September 1st. Yeah,
no, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, and we've got to consider that we are forecasting personal income to be down, and that will affect whatever bump we have in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, there's one more point I wanted to make, and that the estimated taxes are estimated taxes. In other words, people are putting in money assuming that this is what their income would be based upon 2019 income. In other words, when you prepare the returns and you calculate estimated taxes, it assumes a prior year tax. So practitioners are looking at the 2019 and having clients pay in amounts for estimated taxes using 2019 income. That 2019 income may not be accurate for what has happened in 2020, except for the fact that if the company has gotten the PPP funds, for example, or some other additional income from the CARES Act, then that would help it. But essentially, the estimated taxes are not, to me, solid money that you won't, that will be there forever. There are companies that are going to have losses. You have net operating loss carrybacks now that under the CARES Act, we're allowed to go back and carry back losses for more years. And so I'm not so sure we should be counting on those estimated taxes to be money in the bank. Yes.
Beth, can I ask you so I think you did the calculation with like minus 25 and minus 35. What does it take to get to the minus 12% forecast? Roughly.
Yeah, give me a second.
Remembering that minus 12 is somewhat consistent with really underlying negative 16.
I think it's like 30 net minus, wait, hold on. And Carl, if you want to do this with me, it makes me super nervous to do all these calculations.
Yeah, I know. I'm doing it at the same time.
Okay, so if I get anything radically different, then you let me know because it makes.
I have the same feeling. Why do you think I asked you to do it?
Yeah. So I get. Let me make sure I do something. So something in the range of down 28.5%.
For which period is that?
For revenues being down from September until March. And then my assumption is that there will
Quarter
be
over quarter. I mean, quarter over prior year quarter.
yeah, or month. In this case, I'm looking at month, but
Okay,
either way,
okay.
it'd be the same thing. And then for the final quarter, I'm up 20% because, again, something to think about is we just have two like individual tax payment or two income tax payment periods in this fiscal year, which is unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that is usually like
2 Aprils.
2 Aprils. And that's big. It's like $400 million, you know, 304 was there, but part of that was still in fiscal year 2020. So we should intend to even with income being down, I would say something on the level of 400 million, 450, even possibly $500 million. Because you have to remember that the stock market is a large part of estimated taxes, and the stock market is doing quite well right now.
Depends on the day.
Famous
but
last
yes.
words.
Yeah.
But I mean, the Fed has basically said that nobody is going to have run out of money, right? They've dedicated to have their long-term, the yields will be low, right? So that's why when you look at the cost of fixed income and the risk-free cost of risk-free, the risk-free rate, that drives up the equity markets substantially, right? And that's what it's designed to do.
I get numbers very, very close. I didn't try to fine tune it, but I assumed 30% down. And you can get to the minus 12%, but it requires year-over-year growth rates in tax revenues from September all the way through March that are worse than we've seen so far. Right. The worst that we've seen so far with Seth's adjustments was minus 20% for the first 2 months of, well, we did have some months that were larger, right? And actually the fourth fiscal quarter of last fiscal year, I think, was down 35%, roughly.
Yeah, but a lot of that was the shift, right?
Yeah, and the shutdown,
part of that,
right?
Yeah,
and
right.
a complete shutdown statewide. So I'm sorry, but I don't see how we're going to get to minus 12% in any kind of a middle baseline scenario. There's a worst case scenario that absolutely gets us there. You know, a huge surge in the virus in the winter, no vaccine, no rapid testing, and we all behave badly. We can get to minus 15% without even trying, but.
Yeah, I mean, if we just throw up our hands and said no tourism for sure until March, then there would be mass layoffs, and it would it'd be worse than this forecast for sure. That's not what this forecast is.
What's happening right now is that businesses are still trying to hold on under the hope that they'll start to have some tourism come back in the winter. And, you know, if that doesn't happen, yeah, the numbers of permanent closures will go up and the tax revenues will be even worse.
So Seth, I also received a further text from the media that we disabled the recording function. So they're saying that we're not conducting the meeting in accordance with sunshine laws. Could you have someone check, IT check on that?
Yeah, I can look. I'll go.
Okay. They also sent an email, so I'm going to forward that to you and Director Choi.
Yeah.
So if we get in trouble for that, do we have to do this whole thing all over again?
I don't know we'd have to go to the AG and ask what's the recourse at this point.
I mean, to be perfectly fair, it will be available to the entire public
Yeah, but I asked them if that's okay, but they're saying no.
So I move that we adopt a minus 11% for this fiscal year.
I'll second that.
I can live with that.
Wait till you hear
Any
what I
further
have to say about that
discussion?
fiscal year.
Any further discussion,
I
Vice
just,
Chair?
I just had a question
Yeah.
with respect to retail. The GT money coming to retail from, I guess, looking at the shopping centers, looking at the commercial rents. I didn't quite see Ala Moana booming the last trip I took there. And, I look here, and similarly, I don't see the shopping centers open. And so I guess for a while, some of the retail shops were open, but I'm not sure, for example, right now, are you closed down for all those retail?
Yes,
Okay, so
almost all retail has been closed down for 2 weeks on Oahu, yes.
so it's going to be closed down for it's going to be closed down for a month then. So it's
I think the current order is another 2 weeks.
okay. So that was my concern too, about how long retail can last through this downturn.
The interesting thing on retail is interesting to me, I don't know. They didn't lay off nearly as many people as we thought they would have during the last shutdown. I don't have an explanation for it, but if I recall looking at retail jobs statewide, they only went down like 10% in April, May, June. It was really very surprising.
Well, my personal thoughts are that it'll probably be a little higher than 12, maybe like 12.3 or something like that. Just because I think that we have evidence of a economy that seems to be collapsing. But maybe you're going to say it's because of Maui and we have so much reliant upon visitor industry, which we do. And, but so what I see here is probably different from what it is in Honolulu, where you have other industries. But I can't see even the UH being back to normal. And so we don't have a lot of, I see people with receivables now, the slowing of money. And so that's my point, is that we're heading downwards. And if the virus extensions keep going on, I can't see that the 11 would be realistic for what it would be for this fiscal year.
I don't think we're assuming that the shutdowns, I think that's what you were referring to when you said the virus extensions.
Yeah.
I don't think we're assuming that the shutdowns are going to keep occurring. I mean, this requires that we manage the virus. It requires a change. We can't repeat the shutdown that we're in now. That would be devastating.
So could you tell me what your assumptions are as far as the shutdowns right now that you have in Honolulu, and when you expect the tourism to be open for the tourists, say to the neighbor islands at least, without the 14-day quarantine and pre-testing?
The numbers that I'm using are based on an assumption that tourism will start to resume the middle of November, so that we'll actually still get the Christmas period. We'll have an opportunity to hit that demand, and then it will grow slowly from there. And the shutdown on Oahu, we haven't made any specific assumptions about how that's changing. I'll be surprised if it goes on beyond the 2-week period. Right? We couldn't have reopened today because you really need to have your case counts down for a 2-week period for the incubation period. And it's unclear if we have the full testing and contact tracing and quarantine capacity. We just don't have the data right now to know whether we have the robust public health program in place to deal with the reopening, so we don't repeat what happened in July.
You know,
Yeah.
Carl, I look at places like Hong Kong, Singapore, where they've had multiple outbreaks, and Hawaii did a pretty great job initially, but we recently had an outbreak that led to this second shutdown. And I'm trying to think realistically, you know, once we open up, we have more tourists coming in, are we going to have further outbreaks where we may have to either shut down again or partially shut down again? I'm kind of just looking at the track record of other locations, you know, how many outbreaks they've had in terms of this pandemic. And I know personally, China hasn't even opened the border unless you go through a quarantine between China and Hong Kong yet, even to today.
I don't dispute. I mean, it's whack-a-mole, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to go on like that until we have. There's two things that are necessary, and I think in my mind, the first thing that's necessary is widespread rapid testing, and that's a potential game changer. And the science exists. We're still waiting on FDA approval for inexpensive tests that would allow us all to go back to work and go back to school, because we'd all take a test in the morning every morning. And the other thing is the vaccine. And you know, in our assumptions, we assume the vaccine wouldn't be widespread until the second half of next year. And I think that's, so I think we will be playing whack-a-mole for you know, until June, July of next year. And the question is, will we be good at it? Because we weren't good at it in July, right? We couldn't control our own local spread that had almost nothing to do with tourism. It had to do with some of us traveling, but it was really local spread. Yeah, there are no guarantees that we'll be better at it, but we're certainly working hard.
Yeah. Jessica, what are your thoughts?
I think that around the 11 or 12% makes sense, because I'm just looking at adding up. We're at a pretty base level right now, right? Where we don't have any tourism spend. A lot of things are shut down, and our revenues, you know, not including the shift for the income tax, we're still in the $400,000 or 400 million, however many thousands are in there.
400 million,
a month. So, you know, even if we presume that we have this level of activity for Q2 and Q3, and we're, you know, at a really low level, because Q4 of the fiscal year, we're coming off of such a low number from the last fiscal year, 2020. I don't see that it's going to be less than 12% as we've been talking through. So I think negative 11 sounds reasonable.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. Scott, do you have any comments?
No, so I think that makes sense. I mean, to Carl's point, I mean, yeah, you know, there's so many variables here, and there's so many things that can change. I mean, you know, you take a worst case scenario and say that there's not going to be any kind of, you know, testing or cure, and people are going to be gathering in without wearing face masks and everything. I mean, you know, so you can create a worst case scenario, but I think we have to trust that, you know, there's things in place that will allow the economy to reopen, that will be able to hopefully, you know, get people back visiting, restart the economic engine again. And that's why I think, you know, the 11% seems to be a compromise towards that. It shows that there is some level of reopening. You know, we are placing faith that there is going to be some measures in place and some plans put in place to help that reopening. And in doing so, that's why, to me, I think that number doesn't make sense.
Okay, thank you. Marilyn, is there anything further you want to add at this point before we take the vote?
it's a question of whether the government officials will be more, I guess, receptive to thinking about small businesses and them continuing with their business. Because if there's more encouragement of the small businesses and letting small businesses become creative with how to operate their business profitably, then I can see the 11%. If the government says no, everything will be shut down and we're not going to consider this, and this is the way it is. And I think the small business people are the ones who can innovate, and they can figure out a way out so that for their own businesses, they will make money within the guidelines set for healthcare. And so I guess it's a question of trust in what is going to happen in the future. And I guess that can happen. There's a lot of things that could affect things, the stock market and I guess even international events, international tensions, anyway, that could affect this number.
Oh yeah, obviously.
But, I'm talking about China, and so if you are going to be an optimist and say, okay, the government is going to help the small businesses which need the help, then I could say, yeah, 11%. But if not, then I would disagree. So
I think Marilyn, that you're absolutely right that the economy's natural tendency is to grow, and if the government is not in the way, I'm not saying that the shutdowns were not needed, but I do anticipate that there will be growth. I think the numbers were so distorted this last calendar year with all of the PPP money coming in that allowed people to keep employees on the books in the last quarter that perhaps will not be there next year. And we had all the people who are collecting, and some of whom were collecting more on unemployment than they were on wages. And as Seth had pointed out, that has led to maybe more withholding than we would have anticipated. These are all things that are so extraordinary and are hard to calculate. But at the same time, I think what is overwhelming some of these numbers, as Carl pointed out, we had two April 15ths, or we will in this year. And even if income is down next, the income in general is down, personal income for 2020, when people file their taxes. I think just having the fact that we are collecting income tax twice in one fiscal year is really distorting the numbers. So again, I feel comfortable with the 11%, negative 11%.
Okay. Yeah, Marilyn, I think, I kind of agree with Christy. I think we're basically at zero tourists right now. And then we have that extra roughly 3% that got kicked over to this year from estimated 2020 payments that should have been made in April and June, but it looks like quite a bit of it moved over to July. And I mean, I'm hoping, praying we don't have war with China. And I if I had to say, I had to bet, I think there'll be another stimulus because there's a big election coming up in November. I don't know the amount, but I'm kind of factoring that in, that both political parties want to do some kind of stimulus and they'll ultimately agree on an amount. So I'm comfortable with the 11. So are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay.
With the optimistic assumptions.
Yeah. Okay. We'll take a vote. Vice Chair Newell.
Agree.
Okay. Dr. Siderhout.
Sorry, I muted myself.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Dr. Bonham.
I don't know. Sure, I agree with that.
Okay.
You made the motion.
Councilmember Maynard,
I agree. Thank you.
Councilmember Gluck,
Aye.
Councilmember Hayashi.
Agree.
Okay, it's unanimous. Said we all agree on negative 11% for the current fiscal year 21. Okay, next topic is the following 6 years estimate. Who wants to start?
Does it make sense for us to break that into two parts, which is
Do you want to break it maybe fiscal
fiscal
20?
22 and then things after fiscal 22?
Sure.
Yeah, we need to do
Sure.
that.
Okay, sure. Okay, let's talk about fiscal 22 first. Who wants to start?
Well, it's made complicated by the bounce in fiscal first quarter 2021.
Oh,
Right. I
yeah.
mean, at least in my previous forecast, I didn't have a positive growth rate in the first fiscal quarter of this year. And so basically, in a nutshell, I think positive 12% is probably too high now.
Yeah. Agreed.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, I think we have to subtract out the 3 or 4% bump that we got in July. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, the other factor to consider is that we're still operating off a pretty low base in terms of absolute numbers.
Yep.
So if we say 11% for negative 11% for fiscal 21, what is the level that we're talking about, Seth?
I'm sorry, I'm playing around with a bunch of stuff.
It's 5.9 billion.
5.9.
Yeah, 5.9 billion is what you're doing.
So that's $1 billion down from 2020, and if we go up, I don't know. Let's say we go up 10% for sake of discussion.
And that's 6.5 billion.
6.5.
That basically gets us right back to our May forecast. If we go down 11 in the current fiscal year and up 10 in the next fiscal year.
Okay. And we would still be below fiscal 20.
No.
And fiscal 19. Because
yes.
you said 6.6, right? 6.6.
6.55.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so if we think that in absolute terms, our 2022 was correct at 6.5, it would be a bounce of 9.8 from our new estimate.
Yeah.
Anybody get that? Is that my connection?
What's that?
I couldn't hear what Jessica was saying.
Oh, okay. She said
9.8.
9.8% is what her calculation is. Under the assumption that we go up to what, 6.6?
6.5.
6.5, sorry. Well, I had a bigger bump on my forecast, but that's because I had a bigger decline also.
Right.
And I frankly assumed that fiscal 22, my tourism number actually doubled from fiscal 21. So I went from 1.8 to 3.6 million for tourism count, which is still just a fraction of where we were at a 10 million level before.
Yeah, mine more than doubles.
Your tourism number?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the summer of 2023? No, 2022 is a long ways off.
So I get you in order to get to close to the levels of fiscal year 2020, you need 12% growth.
Fiscal
If you have
20.
if you have a minus 11 in fiscal year 2021.
So closer to 6.9 billion.
Yeah, and that's at 12%, you get 6.67. So you're still not there yet. If you grew by 13,
Well, I don't think anybody's talking about getting there. Not at
It's
least.
to get to fiscal year 2020, you would have to grow.
That's not a target, incidentally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, fiscal year 2022 will not have two April 15th as we did or as we will in 2021.
You know,
Yeah.
the other thing I think we should consider is the virus, whether, I guess the assumption is, okay, it's going to last maybe to next year, everybody will have a vaccine. But from what I've been reading about the virus is that it's going to be here for maybe about at least 3 years or so. The airlines and the hotels, the projections as far as when they'll recover from 2019 levels is that it's going to be about 2023. So I think that if you look at how long the virus is going to last, then it's going to result in people not still wanting to travel during this whole thing. I don't think it's going to be a rebound like it is. I mean, if people are brave, I mean, there's a lot of people I know who don't want to fly airplanes, whether domestically or internationally. They just won't get on a plane. And so if that's the case, then we won't see that kind of rebound. The number of people who are willing to take the vaccine may not be as high as you think. Not everybody's going to be willing to get a vaccine, from what I've been reading. And so I think, it would be nice if we looked at, what it was in 2019 and say, okay, it's going to continue on. But all these factors, including the fact that the virus itself is very infectious, that it might not be as bright a future until the 2 or 3 years or so.
So Marilyn, the numbers you were talking about for recovery of airlines and tourism, to put that in perspective, our current forecast, our May forecast for general fund tax revenue doesn't have us recover until 2025. And okay, even with the change to a minus 11% even if we used 12% for 2022, we still wouldn't completely recover until 2025. And so I don't think you can characterize what we're forecasting as sort of any kind of rosy bounce back. I mean, I agree with you that there people are afraid of traveling. I also think all that will, all those expectations and those feelings about travel, they're not going to go back to normal, but they are going to improve as vaccines are available and as rapid testing is available and as treatments become better, right? Everything is fluid. And so getting back to 5 million visitors is certainly within the range of possibility in the next few years.
So I guess with that in mind, and the fact that this year we have the extra money from the 2019 tax returns, I don't believe that we can go over the same hump, with that additional money and say we're gonna have that much growth over and above the tax collections for that year.
I think you could, right? Like I'm sorry, I never speak, but it's like fiscal year 2022, which is a year from now, right? And all we're saying is you could happen to have more, 10% more 10% more revenue than you did the previous year, right? And so we're assuming, I mean, I guess what we're assuming in a year from now is there will be some semblance of a tourism, industry. And, you know, if you think about a year and a half from now, I could foresee some, like a decent tourism industry, right? So that all you have to do that is, in order to get, and that would put us close to fiscal year 2020 revenues, you know, and that's not, I guess what we're anticipating is if there's no shutdowns of any kind in fiscal year 2022, which I guess is a big if, then you're going to expect a big rebound.
Let's pretend that the rebound is somewhere like 10%, but we don't have the extra April 15th in fiscal year 2022, which would maybe take out 3 or 4%. That would be like a 6 or 7% rebound. Does that make sense?
No, because I think what you're thinking of, what we're really discussing is the level of which we're coming off since we're putting everything, I think there's two options. One is you discuss everything in absolute terms, which is the amount of money you think you're going to bring in. We can add that on to what you did in your fiscal year 22 or fiscal year 2021 forecast, right? Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to put everything in our minds with like, oh, we got to think about percentage growth, and then we have to throw in the added individual income payment.
No, what I'm saying, Seth, is that I think the 2021 forecast is overstated, not overstated because it is what it is,
yeah.
But it's going to be unusually high because we're collecting taxes twice for income tax. So I think we have to consider that will not happen in 2022. That's the point I'm making.
So I guess the question is, how much more money in dollar terms do you think you'll bring in fiscal year 2022 than versus fiscal year 2021? And we can figure out the rate. So
if you think about fiscal 2021 as a year, and as you pointed out, we've got these extra income tax payments. We also have an economy that is on the mend. We're still dealing with complete shutdown of tourism not complete shutdown, but some extended shutdown of tourism. And then in fiscal 2022, you don't get the double tax months, but tourism is back up to some fraction, 40, 50, 60% of what it was 2 or 3 years ago. If you adopt a 12% forecast, you're only talking about adding 800 million to the revenue that you collect in 2022 versus 2021. That doesn't strike me as too much improvement to expect from an economy that has learned to play the whack-a-mole and is dealing with growing tourism. Now that I think Seth is absolutely right. It is really hard to look at these things in growth rate terms. It helps a lot to look at it in levels.
We can look at it in levels and subtract out 300 or 400 million, right?
No.
From the double tax date.
Well, but if I was going to do that, then I would start with a higher number than 12%, because I mean, we're going to be down 2 years in a row at, minus 6.3 in fiscal 19, minus 11, fiscal 20, minus 11 in fiscal 21. Only having a bounce purely on economic grounds of 12% would be unusual. Normally the bounce would be much larger than that. I mean, think about going from a world where you have almost no tourism to 4 or 5 million visitors a year, and the kind of bounce and activity that's going to create.
Excuse me, I'm kind of looking at it this way. We had that extra money coming in for the taxes, plus we had all this care funds coming in this year. And we're going to have to, beat that hurdle, percentage increase. And so I don't think that we can keep the 12% that we had previously if we're lowering the amount for fiscal year 2020 and 2021. I think that if we're lowering those percentage increases, then we'll have to actually lower the amount for 2022 also.
It's someone else's turn to make a motion.
Maybe 9.
I'll move that we show an increase of 8.5%
Ooh.
for fiscal year 2022.
I won't
I don't
second.
know.
I'll second the motion.
I think that's too low. I mean, you're starting with a low base. We are assuming that there will be a recovery in tourism. I mean, if you want to be explicit and say tourism is not going to recover,
yeah,
in the kind of fashion that we're assuming at the present time, then it's a different story. But if you're not being explicit in that assumption, or if you don't share that assumption, then perhaps you can, the bounce back will be lower. But I don't know what to assume otherwise.
Well, my assumption is that we will not have the extra 4% that we're going to have in 2021 because we will not collect income taxes twice. So it's really a 12% assumption on recovery. Less,
well, I haven't
the income that we will not collect because we're not going to collect from the previous year. And we've got to actually explicitly correct for that.
Excuse me, this is Marilyn. I second that motion and I add on that we won't have the big CARES money. I don't expect that we're going to have that kind of money coming through in that year 2022. And I also think that if you're looking at all the economic data from the airlines and the hotels that don't expect a recovery until 2023, I think that 8.5% is reasonable.
And I would actually like to add that the next year recovery should be more robust than perhaps we had been thinking, because we won't have that hurdle to go over.
Okay, so what would 8.5 take us up to in terms of the level?
6.46 billion.
A bit short of 6.5.
Yeah. 80 million less than our May forecast. And just for, because we keep talking about when things are going to recover, if you adopt the 8.5 in 2022 and keep the rest of the forecast, then we don't have general fund recovering until 2026 now, instead of 2025 previously.
And as I said, I think the recovery after that will be more robust.
Yeah, we could probably increase the recovery in the out years.
Jessica, what do you think?
I would agree with 8.5 because I'm thinking somewhere around the 6.5 in gross revenue makes sense. So that gets us to 6.46.
So are you said 6.5% you're thinking?
No, so I agree with the 8.5% gets us to 6.5 billion.
Okay. Scott, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking that it was a little low. I was, kind of siding with Carl and Jack that I think what I was hearing is I think they were thinking it's going to be closer to 10, which gets us, I think the prior, the 8.5 gets us below our where we were anticipating for 2022. But I think, you know, I think we will get back closer to our forecast, our May forecast. One thing, you know, that I didn't consider, but, you know, I think is there, Marilyn, to address your point about tourism. You know, I don't think you can focus solely on vacationers, because there's going to be business travelers that are going to have to come into town to do business, you know, whether it's from the Asian markets, whether it's from the mainland or whatnot. I mean, I'm anticipating that I'm going to have to travel whether I like it or not. And so, you know, that's going to happen when the economy starts back up again. People are going to have to come into Hawaii, you know, and deal with it. So, you know, as far as the tourist numbers, that's would be included in there. So it's not just pure vacationers, which we'll get some of that, but there's also going to be business travelers that are going to start to come back as well. So that's why I think from a visitor perspective, we will see, you know, a bump once the quarantines, you know, disappear and they have a plan as far as how to deal with some of these people coming in. I mean, obviously businesses don't want to send their people here if they have to quarantine for 14 days. It doesn't make sense. They can't get any work done. But, you know, if there's rapid testing or there's a plan, they can take a test before and get here. You know, to me, I think that it'll open up some business travel as well, and you will see a little bit more robust travel from that perspective. So that's why I think, I don't know if Carl and Jack actually physically or, you know, verbally stated 10%, but that's kind of where I was thinking.
I'd like to say that, you know, when we're talking about business travel, we're talking about people who want to have conventions here. And then you have the social distancing thing for 6 feet, you know, try to fit everyone in and have the social distancing requirements wearing a mask. And it's going to be a lot harder to have a convention or weddings with everybody having to wear a mask and have social distancing. And then the factor is, you know, if you're traveling, and I did, you know, as traveling from the mainland to here is a hassle, because you have to worry about getting the virus. So you have all your, you know, your mask and all these precautions that you have to take. Then you have to fill up the paperwork for safe travels. And it's, you know, it's a really hassle factor. There's a lot of people who don't understand the safe travels, because I was following some people who didn't want to take the temperature. They were speaking they're from Europe and didn't speak English. And it's not going to be the same, because people who are coming internationally, for example, might not understand the requirements that you have to go with a safe travel. Is that available in different languages, for example? It's going to be a hassle factor to do the business travel. And it's even going to be a hassle factor to do it for if we want travelers from other countries.
Are we still talking about the 8.5%?
Yeah. Yes.
No, wasn't sure. I thought maybe you were trying to lower the forecast, or what your motion was.
Well, he was saying that he thought it would be, you know, it would be less. And I'm saying to him that from my experience, it will be a hassle factor for people to come over, you know, as tourists or even as business tourists.
You know, I feel a lot more comfortable with 9%.
Well, I think that what I'm taking into account, Carl, is Seth said earlier that the 2019 payments were more than expected. And we know roughly 3% of the estimated 2020 estimated payments were moved into fiscal year 2021. So I think that's about 3.5%. And if our previous forecast was about 12, then 12 minus 3.5 is 8.5.
I was kidding.
Yeah.
I mean,
I want to give you.
I do think the forecast is probably too low. It's more like what I think would be my pessimistic forecast. But you know, as I always do, I acknowledge that the uncertainty is quite large, and you know, the difference between 8.5 and 10 or even 11 is really hard to nail down. I'll let Jack dissent.
Okay. Jack?
No.
You want to try to persuade you know, persuade what looks like the majority.
Oh, what is it about no that you don't understand? No, you know, I think 8.5 is going to be too low. You know, there will, and that's assuming there will be, you know, recovery in tourism, and that in fact, you know, our tourism counts will double between fiscal 2011 and fiscal 2021. I'm sorry, and fiscal 2022. So, you know, on that assumption, you know, I think a 10% recovery or an 8.5% recovery is too small, in spite of the washing money around for the income tax. So, you know, when the vote's taken on 8.5%, I'll say no.
Yeah, I'm likely to say no as well.
Okay. Scott, do you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I think once again, I think it's low as well. So I'd be inclined to vote no as well.
Okay. Anyone else want to add anything? Marilyn, Christy, Jessica? Okay, the motion is fiscal year 2022 at 8.5%. Council Vice Chair Newell?
Yes.
Council, Dr. Siderhout?
No.
Dr. Bonham?
No.
Councilmember Maynard?
Yes.
Councilmember Gluck?
Yes.
Councilmember Hayashi?
No.
The chair votes yes to support the motion at 8.5%. So it carries by a 4-3 vote. Okay, next item is to discuss the out years, fiscal year 2023 to 2027. Okay, Christy, do you want to start us off? Because he thought the bounce back might be a little higher.
Yes, I do think that the fiscal 2021 and fiscal 2022 are distorted by so many things, but including the postponement of the tax payment. So I would support a more rapid increase for the out years going past 2022. I think we were at like something like 3%. I think something like, I don't know, 5% would make more sense. I do think the economy is going to come back. I don't think this virus will last forever. I think the rebound will be strong, and but it may take time. So that's why I think the out years will be perhaps stronger than what we had projected earlier.
Thank you, Christy. Anyone else want to? Carl?
I move that we adopt fiscal year 2023, 6%, fiscal year 2024, 4%, and leave the last 2 years at 3%.
I'll second that motion.
So just to be clear, fiscal 2023, 6%. Fiscal 24, you said 4%. And then the next 3 years will be 3%. Keep it at the 3%. Yeah. Okay.
So, this is Marilyn.
Yeah.
Could you explain why the out years you think it'll be 3%, or is it just a holding place?
Because the economy tends to grow at roughly 1% real and roughly 2% inflation. I mean, that's a number that we've been converging to in our forecasts pretty regularly for decades. Doesn't mean it's right. Did you want something higher?
Well, I was just wondering about the inflation factor with all this trillions of dollars that they put in, and I was concerned about the inflation factor in the later years after hopefully some businesses recover with the low interest rates. But anyway, I was just curious. So
if you're worried about inflation, the numbers should be higher.
Huh?
If you're worried about inflation, the number should be higher, because that number, that 3% basically comes from a roughly 1% real growth and a 2% inflation.
Yeah.
And so if you want to boost the inflation number to say 3%, and the Fed has announced policy that says they're willing to basically allow inflation to run above their target. So I understand that it's certainly a possibility.
But maybe that's a little bit too far out there in the future with so many variables going on and civil unrest going on and international tensions right now, that maybe for those out years, it'd probably be safer to have it at the 3% for those years.
You don't want 4?
No, then later on I'd have to go and argue with you of why it should be down to 3. So we'll save it that way.
So the motion currently before us that's been seconded is fiscal 23 will be 6%, fiscal 24 will be 4%, and the final 3 years, fiscal 25 to 27 will be 3%. Any further discussion, Jack?
No, I'm good with it.
One question, where do we end up, Carl, when we assume?
Yeah, I was going to ask, where do we get back? When do we recover?
Well, we recover by end of 2024. 2025 revenues are 7.3 billion.
So close to where we were for fiscal 20?
Yeah, 2019.
Well, 2019.
No, above 20. 2019 was 7.14 or something like that.
Okay.
So we get really close to that in 2024, and we pass it in 2025. And fiscal 2027 is 7.78 billion, 7.8 billion. So it's by fiscal 2027, you would be a whopping 9% above fiscal 2019 in nominal dollars.
My own forecasts I have us coming in slightly higher than that, but I'm happy to live with what was been proposed.
Yeah, we're talking out in 2027. That's an awful long horizon.
Yeah.
Hopefully things will be better than that.
Yeah.
So.
Jessica, do you have any comments on that, the proposal?
No, I think that's reasonable.
Scott?
No, I think that's reasonable as well.
Okay. Marilyn, anything?
No, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Okay, let's take a vote. So the vote before us, the motion before us is fiscal 23 will be 6%, fiscal 24 will be 4%, the final 3 years, fiscal 25 through fiscal 27 will be 3%. Vice Chair Newell?
I agree.
Dr. Siderhout?
Aye.
Dr. Bonham?
Aye.
Councilmember Maynard?
Agree.
Councilmember Gluck?
Aye.
Councilmember Hayashi?
Aye.
So the motion carries unanimously. Okay, that's great. Okay, next item on the agenda is
BNF.
BNF. Hi, Donovan.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair, Council members. We have provided you with our report of revised projections of general fund non-tax revenues, non-general fund tax and non-tax revenues since the May 28th meeting. Our report includes a summary of the significant changes. I did want to highlight a few things. Our revenue estimates update was completed in July while we're in the middle of this lockdown and this economic uncertainty. Most of the departments updated revenues to actual for the prior fiscal year and attempted to project short and long-term revenue trends based on the information they had at that time. I do want to point out on table 5, which is other than, sorry, hang on. Other than special funds, table 5, we added a line in there to reflect the federal COVID-19 funds as a separate line. This is something we did also back in 2009 when we had that ARA funds. So as departments get their awards, they are adding it to their revenue estimates. There are some that came through the legislature and some that were just supplemental monies that came from the feds as a piggyback on existing agreements with the departments. So sometimes it's coming through different routes. So the numbers, the current amount awarded to state agencies is 1.5 billion currently. So this will not always tie in until they actually get their award documentation and then incorporate it into their estimates. But we did want to break out that line item.
Hey, Donovan?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but on that same page, the line above your COVID line.
Yes.
The first item that's a big swing, about over $1 billion swing.
Yes.
Do you know what's up with that?
Yeah. So what happened was, in the last update, I included funds in that federal line because the last report did not have the COVID-19 broken out.
Oh, I see.
So I had to remove it from there and show it
okay.
on a separate line.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. The other thing I did want to point out was that the state has temporarily suspended pre-funding balance payments for to the Public Employees Trust Fund. This is for OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits. That's under Act 268. There was a structured payment plan so that we could fund the unfunded liabilities.
Right.
But in this current situation, under Executive Order, I think it's number 6, that has been suspended for the current year. There's a plan to extend that for additional years, but that will take legislative action. So that's something that's going to be presented to the legislature in this next session. But those are significant changes. That's like about $500 million. So that comes not only from the state, but also from the counties. Yeah. Those are the most significant things. And we've provided in our report an explanation of the other significant changes. And that's it.
Any questions of Donovan? Okay. Do we have a motion to adopt his report?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, vote to accept Mr. Chen's report. Vice Chairman Newell?
Aye.
Dr. Siderhout?
Aye.
Dr. Bonham?
Aye.
Councilmember Maynard?
Aye.
Councilmember Gluck?
Aye.
Councilmember Hayashi?
Aye.
Okay, so by unanimous vote, the council has adopted the report from Mr. Chen. Thank you very much, Mr. Chen. I like your.
It is a BNF. It is a BNF report. Okay, it's not necessarily my report.
Okay. By the way, I like your wallpaper of.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And as an ERS beneficiary, can I object strenuously to all these machinations you guys are doing?
Well, we're trying to get through this.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. So next item on the agenda is the next meeting. What is the reporting date, Dr. Kobe, for the next? It's going to be a personal income meeting.
November 5th.
November 5th. Okay.
That's a Thursday.
Yeah.
A couple of days after Election Day.
Oh, that'll be interesting. So the election day is November 3rd. What's the preference? Would you guys like to have it before the election or after the election?
Election day is a holiday for state employees, so I guess
Yes.
we can't do that, right?
Yes. So either the day before or the week before,
And
or
this
the,
is a TPI number, right?
yeah, personal income.
How do
What
people
about the
feel?
29th, the afternoon of the 29th?
That's a
That's
Thursday afternoon.
Thursday. Mhm. Just throwing it out there.
Normally that's when we have it, usually the prior Thursday.
2 days before Halloween.
Yeah.
You can still get your costume, Jack.
How is everyone in terms of having the meeting on Thursday,
I'm good that day.
November, yeah, October 29th at 2 p.m. Is that good for everyone?
Yeah.
Can we do it a little later? Can we do 3 p.m.?
Okay, you have
Or is
something?
that too late in the day? I do have something at 2 o'clock that day.
Oh, okay, I think three is fine. Set Dr. Kobe.
Three's fine.
Yeah, that's okay. Because that's usually a fast meeting.
Yeah, that's fine with Department of Taxation.
Yeah, if it was general fund, then it might run past 4:30. Okay, so we'll have the meeting for personal income on Thursday, October the 29th at 3 p.m. And I assume it's going to be by Zoom again, Dr. Kobe, as opposed to Teams.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. One item I did want to raise is, what is the council members' thoughts about maybe having some kind of training, perhaps by even some of the council members and maybe other people like Dr. Kobe, Dr. Tian, particularly the issues I think I would put out there is maybe to give the council members more understanding of the personal income forecasts and what goes into that forecast, as well as maybe kind of looking at the models, understanding more the models for the general fund.
I'd be in favor of that.
Yeah.
I'd be open to that.
I'd be interested in that.
Yeah. How about Dr. Siderhouse and Dr. Bonham?
I've got nothing better to do.
Okay.
Oh, you always make me laugh, Jack.
I'd actually wouldn't mind actually seeing the models.
Okay.
I can't agree with Jack that I have nothing better to do, but
Well, you're not retired like me,
Yeah.
so I would expect that.
I would like to actually see the equations in the models. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember what they look like, and I don't know the stuff that I can't remember what the stuff was that UCLA did.
Yeah. I know from time to time the model's been updated. Carl, would you be willing to maybe be one of the presenters, particularly on the personal income forecast?
Which year?
Oh, no, I mean, kind of maybe.
Between now and October?
Oh, no. This would probably, I'm looking at it down the road, probably maybe even next summer.
When
maybe the
tax
spring.
revenues recover, I'll be, I'm always open to happy to talk about it.
We defer to you quite a bit on the personal income forecast.
So let's get Eugene. He can contribute.
Okay.
I'll
What about both of you? Would you be willing to co-present?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Okay.
For
So
Jack knows as much as any of us about all this stuff.
Oh,
He
I
wrote
stopped
some
paying
of the
attention a few years ago.
Well, it'd be great if
I'd be
Jack.
curious if they're the same equations
All of them are.
we did in 1980.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll talk to Dr. Kobe more about it offline. And with that, the meeting is concluded for today. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye.
Kurt,
Yes.
just can you be available later today? Because we're gonna send, since it's due tomorrow,
Yeah.
we're gonna send you the letter pretty soon.
Okay. I have a 2 o'clock meeting, so I can look at it before that or after that meeting.
Okay.
That meeting will probably be about an hour.
Do you guys, do you want a lot of narrative in the letter like last time?
No. I think I want to stay away from a lot of narrative, but just maybe a couple paragraphs on the highlights of the meeting.
Okay.
Short paragraphs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So expect an email from us today.
Okay, and then send
Great.
me a text if I don't respond, or even if you want to tell me you sent the email.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
guys.
thank you, Christy and Marilyn. Do
Yep.
you guys have any thoughts on your end about having a workshop or training session?
No, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah,
Sounds
I
like
know
good
we've had.
fun.
Actually, the model that we're talking about, you know, I actually was, my numbers came out very positive, and I didn't want to tell Jack or Carl that, you know, I was the most optimistic. One of
Are we still in public, or have we shut down the public?
We're still public as far as I
Oh,
know.
it's still public. Oh, okay.
We'll
There's no way to turn it off. And okay, I don't want it to be recorded. That's why.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
we'll see you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thanks. Carl, Sid, did you check on the recording?
Yeah, the recording is, everybody can record from their computer.
Okay.
They just couldn't record over it. But it is very accessible. It's the equivalent of showing up to a meeting and
Okay.
recording the meeting. And then we're going to put a recording on the website as soon as it's available.
Yeah. If you could put it in as soon as possible, because I don't know if the media is going to file some kind of protest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, we'll do. And
Okay,
again, maybe it wasn't as easy as clicking a button, but clicking another button, you can record your screen, and
Okay.
it didn't stop anybody from recording their screen. So
Okay, I know I could do it as a participant, but
yeah.
Yeah. Christy, did you have
No,
anything?
I'm going.
I like your background with all that.
Yeah, it's very sophisticated.
The guitar and what is?
I have a cluttered house, is what
Uh-huh.
it is. And not a lot of places to put a cello.
Okay.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, bye.